Welcome to this session on leveraging ICT to leapfrog economic development as part of the GrowthNet overall theme on restoring higher growth in emerging markets. It gives me great pleasure to chair such a distinguished panel which has representation from academia, industry, as well as government.
Thank you.
Mr. Dr. Soumitra Dutta is the Anne and Elmer Lindseth Dean and Professor of Management in the Johnson Graduate School of Management at Cornell University. Atul Jain is the Chief Operating Officer of Smart Electronic Business, LeEco India. Joydeep Mukherji is the Chief Financial Officer and VP Operations, iMerit Technology Services. Tan Chin Nam is the Senior Corporate Advisor and former Permanent Secretary of Singapore. Welcome, gentlemen. I'm sure most of you are aware that we are standing at what we call as the fourth industrial revolution. Now, the world has evolved over many decades, from steam engines to electricity to mechanization to the surge of electronics and information technology. Now, the fourth industrial revolution is coming together of the virtual, biological and physical systems, and while it may seem like an incremental shift from the digital era, in reality we cannot even predict the transformations it will bring when you combine all of these things. There are multiple dimensions to the fourth industrial revolution, and technologies such as the Internet of Things is connecting physical objects, gadgets, processes, grids, factories and their operations virtually. Everything is interconnected. IoT is enabling virtual control of any object from anywhere across the globe, and you can switch on your washing machine from your office and your refrigerator can self-order provisions to the local hypermarket. On the other hand, a lot of hardware-intensive systems are becoming virtualized or software-defined, as we call it. Telecom, which was earlier a set of manually operated switches and which later evolved to software-operated switches, is now moving to a phase where there are no hardware switches, just software switching programs. Manufacturing moved from heavily human effort-intensive craftsmanship to automated manufacturing, and with the advent of 3D printing will become purely software-defined manufacturing. Cars now have computing power which is much more than the system that guided Apollo astronauts to the moon. Nanotechnology and quantum computing are breaking significant barriers in the world of computing in terms of scale of devices and the performance thresholds. Artificial intelligence and machine learning, and every day you see some articles or some applications, is also adding a whole new dimension to this transformation. And computers are now able to recognize people's photos and identify a person from a cluster of photos. Computers are capable of self-learning and constantly improving their own abilities. When we looked at the AlphaGo computer, AI has also entered into a new age of maturity. So as you can see, the world is becoming an even more fascinating place. So let's hear from each of our esteemed panelists about the perspective on the impact of ICT on our future, not just necessary for the elite class, but also in terms of inclusion and what it covers. So I'll start with Dr. Soumitra Dutta. Sir, we would like to hear your perspective on how ICT can help integrate even more people in economic activity and be used as major increase in productivity. What do you see as the major developments going forwards? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairman Ramadorai, and good afternoon, everyone. It's indeed a pleasure to be invited to speak out here at the GrowthNet conference. And in my brief remarks, I wanted to talk about three things. The first one is the global race with technology and also the increasing global gap Now, I'm reminded of an experience like this when some years ago I was in an international conference and I happened to strike up a conversation with one of the participants. He was a retired CEO from a large Japanese corporation, and he mentioned that when he was a young child, around 7, 8 years old, his parents took him to visit the Niagara Falls. And he remembers that at the Niagara Falls, which is a very typical touristic thing to do when you visit the US, his parents bought some gifts for him at those various gift shops. As a young child, he remembers that those gifts were made in Japan. And that for him was something he remembered. Today, of course, if you went to Niagara Falls, you probably would not find too many gifts made in Japan out there, made in probably some other countries you can name. But what has happened in Japan over the last 5 decades is a revolution in the country using technology as a driver. And that revolution is not unique to Japan. It has propelled the economic rise of Japan. It has changed the brand of Japan. And it's also happened in very similar terms in countries like Korea, Singapore, we have Israel, we have India to some degree, and we have, of course, other examples in Europe like Finland. But this is a global race that is happening, and there are countries who are in fact strategically using technology to become more competitive. Now, as you do so, what we are also seeing is the gap is not shrinking. The gap, in fact, is growing. Every year, I produce a report called the Global Information Technology Report. We have done that report for 15 years, benchmarking technology progress across countries. And what we are noticing in the data over time is that the gap between the countries that are doing it better than others, that are using technology more effectively than others, and the rest is not shrinking, is in fact growing. A very simple case in point is broadband. Yes, today we are very happy to talk about cell phone penetration in India. But guess what? Broadband access, especially on mobile platforms, is lagging far behind other countries. We have 4G, but calls drop quite frequently. Internet bandwidth is limited. And what you see is that the countries that are progressing faster, they are investing more, they're doing it better, the businesses improving faster, and this gap is not shrinking. And this is very important for us to remember in India, because in India we often have a false sense of complacency around technology. Because of what Infosys did and what TCS did,
Yes.
and their great success stories, we think we are at the top of the technology heap. And that is not true. And we have to understand the reality out there in terms of national development. The second point is around leadership. For the last 4 years, I am part of a university in the US called Cornell University. And I am incredibly privileged to be part of probably the most ambitious project in the world, certainly in the US, in higher education right now. It is something called Cornell Tech. Some of you may have heard about it, but around 7 years ago, Mayor Bloomberg, he had a situation in New York City where the economy was really collapsing. Finance, media, sectors which were the bedrock of the economy were not strong any longer. He also realized that New York City needed to revitalize the economy. So in a very typical American fashion, he said, let's have a global competition. I want a major technology university into the city. Why? Because he understood a major university acts as a magnet of talent. Faculty, professors, companies, the whole thing works together. There was a global competition. Stanford, Cornell, the two finalists. Cornell won. There's great news for Cornell. But let me tell you why that is an exciting project. That's exciting because it's not just a university setting up a campus in a major city. It's a unique project that is building on a partnership between a major research technology university, Cornell, with the local government, in this case, city government of New York City. Mayor Bloomberg's government gave 13 acres of land in Midtown Manhattan to Cornell, half of Roosevelt Island. So some of you have visited New York, the island on the East River, opposite the UN. Half of the island is now given to Cornell. And the private sector is heavily engaged. In fact, there's a whole co-location architecture in which companies base themselves on the campus and work together with the university very closely. And very important, the civil society is also engaged. For the first time, professors at Cornell Tech are being required to teach in the local middle school and local high school as part of the official university contract. There's a whole group of people looking at how to engage local middle school and high schoolers with the whole research professorial infrastructure of Cornell. The ecosystem out here, universities, government, private sector, civil society, I think is an example of what you need to succeed with technology. Of course, you need leadership. Mayor Bloomberg started it all. And these components become very important. So we have done studies looking at why has Singapore succeeded, why Israel succeeded, and why some other countries succeeded. Somehow, for different reasons, these kind of components come together. And that is very important to keep in mind if you want to talk about using technology to leverage a country's economic development. The third point and the last point is about the role of technology and people. There's a lot of talk in recent years around how artificial intelligence is automating jobs. I think Shashi Tharoor earlier talked about how maybe 40% of jobs might be disappearing because of intelligent technology. Some of that fear is real. I have a PhD in artificial intelligence, so I know some of the basic technologies a little bit. And yes, over time, technology has automated different parts of an economic system. And that will continue. So I'm not saying that will not decrease, but also if you look at the history, technologies also help create jobs. What I wanted to focus on is there's a very important element which we should not forget today about how technology, especially new technology, can help give back to people. I'll give you one simple example. My parents live in Delhi. Around 3 or 4 years ago, there's a very old lady who acts as a house helper to my mother. And she got her first cell phone. And when I came home to visit, she was very proud and she showed me her cell phone. Probably one of the first devices that she actually personally owned of high technology. So I asked her, how does this change your life? And she said, something very interesting. This lady, like many similar house helpers in India, she was working in like 6, 7 homes. And usually what she had to do was she had to go to a home. If the home was locked, she had to wait in front of the gate till the people returned. That's the way the system works. And now what she was doing is with the phone, she was calling in advance just to check, are you at home? Should I come now? It was a very, very simple thing. But for her, it gave her back control on her life. And it made a huge difference to her just to be able to use the phone and plan her day a little bit more effectively. I can give you other examples like this. But the reality out here is that just as technology is taking away something, technology is also giving back to us. Let's take, for example, this big focus on big data analytics.
Yep.
Today, inside companies, there's so much information available. And the big question is, what do you do with that information? Are we, in fact, educating, training, giving the right skills to our employees to make sense of that information? Are we empowering them to act on that information? And this phenomena is something that a colleague from Harvard Business School many years ago, Shoshana Zuboff, coined and used the term called informate. She basically got her tenure at Harvard Business School for just coining the word informate. Of course, more than that, but that was her primary contribution. Distinguishing between automate and informate. Automate is automating, taking away. Informate is giving back information. And that can change the whole culture of organizations. So the final comment I would make is, really let's not forget, people remain the drivers of development, of progress. And technology can be a big tool in also helping people to do more if we as leaders in organizations are also prepared to allow that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Soumitra.
much.
Atul, what's your perspective, both from your experience at Samsung and now with LeEco? How do you see the opportunities and challenges created by the integration of economic players and consumers in millions? Please.
Thank you so much. First of all, a big thank you for inviting me over here to the GrowthNet team. I think I will just like to kind of amplify and expand what Professor Soumitra already mentioned to all of us. Technology is actually creating the gaps between countries, which is far more than what we as normal citizens of a particular country are able to see. I have lived in Korea, and you mentioned Korea in your this thing with Samsung for some time, and I could see the difference, and this was as recent as last year. And the way technology is used over there, not only to facilitate day-to-day working in the organizations, but also to keep monitoring tools and systems across the city so that the whole society works in the way it is expected to work. It's not really kind of monitoring you or stopping you from doing the right things, but it certainly puts a halt to you in case something wrong is happening or something irrelevant is about to happen. Coming back to India, if you see over here in Delhi, I live in Delhi and I'm a Delhi guy, you see, and it's actually a thing I've seen all across the bigger cities, Jakarta, Mumbai. Traffic is such a big issue. Now, what can you do? One simple thing could be what Singapore does or some other countries do, which is levy such a heavy tax or such a heavy disincentive to reduce vehicles off the road. But in the absence of a very strong public transportation system in developing countries, which I mentioned just now, what can simply be done through technology, through the use of communication systems, is to have a very good monitoring in areas where this is a problem. And that monitoring with the right leadership and right tools provided to teams which are accountable for it can significantly reduce the menace of that problem. So if, for example, in Delhi, we know where the choke points are, one simple solution is widen the choke points or remove the choke points. Now that's a little long-term solution with all the infrastructure bottlenecks that developing countries typically would have. But how do you manage the best situation? Monitor it, and as soon as something is developing as a bigger choke point, how can you immediately rush some resources there to resolve that issue? Now this is a very typical tactical example which I have given as a use of technology which can be done to improve day-to-day working over here. But I think on a larger scale, talking about the economic development that a country like India and developing countries can benefit from, there needs to be a much stronger ecosystem built in. What does that ecosystem mean, according to me? It just means people who are responsible for enabling that technology reach the common man. So there are devices or screens, which are actually the first interface of technology in most cases. It could be any device. I mean, I don't want to name it, wearables or in hand or wherever you have it. And then you need to have these devices connected to each other. And then these devices need to be connected to the cloud. These are all ecosystem parts which then enable the information or the content to reach the right places without drops, in a faster way. Professor Soumitra again mentioned the challenges of connectivity and broadband that we have. And I can immediately see the difference in developing countries like us and the developed world like, again, Korea or Taiwan or some even countries in those parts. Japan, you mentioned. There's a huge difference in the connectivity and the broadband which is available in those countries and what is available in India. Now, these are all parts of the ecosystem: devices, content, cloud, the service providers. All of them have to actually come together and create an ecosystem which enables the common man to start benefiting from the benefits that technology can bring to you. And one more thing I want to stress on this over here is that India is a relatively low per capita country. We all know that. So we also have to ensure that the benefits of technology will percolate down if the cost in the final hands of the consumer is also kept within a certain level. What level I'm not defining or not even suggesting, but we have to be cognizant of the fact that what can work, back to my Korea or a Japan example, may not work in India, because the ability for consumers, the want and the desire is there, but the ability to actually pay for it is much lower over here. So you'll have to find a solution, these ecosystem players, so that in the end, the normal consumer can actually benefit from it. So what I'm talking about is a system where there can be some disruptive pricing, which places the benefit of technology in the hands of the consumer, and then you can gradually have some other system of costing the whole thing. It could be a pay-per-use kind of a phenomena, or it could be a small monthly recurring phenomena. That again, I'm leaving back to the various debates and discussions from a commercial point of view. But end of the day, technology has to be accessible to the common man in the denomination that is affordable to him. So that's the other point which I wanted to make about the ecosystem part of it. The last part which I would like to talk about is that, and I think you touched upon it a little bit, there's so much of data being available now, again because of this interconnection of millions and billions of devices which is projected in the future, that this data itself, if it is monitored very well and if it is algorithms are there which can help you actually build in, I'm using artificial intelligence, not the way Professor Soumitra may define, but some kind of an intelligence which can help predict the use and behavior of humans. Now this data can actually be used in a very productive way by developing the right back-end algorithms to define how the masses are going to work around. How the masses are, what is the feeling of the masses which is coming across about any particular issue. So I think it can be used in a tremendous way to not only bring benefits in a direct way to consumers, but also in an indirect way by managing and the society in a much more productive way. So this is all that I have to really comment on in terms of my two pieces. I hope it's useful and we can have a discussion later on with all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Atul. Joydeep, I think we would like to know about the potential of frugal innovation in developing ICT in emerging market countries, and more importantly, accelerating the economic and social development process in these countries, and also about how technology can be leveraged for large-scale impact. I think you are doing some tremendous work.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So I'm the CFO of two organizations. One is Anudeep Foundation, which is a non-profit which creates sustainable livelihood for impoverished youth, marginalized women, through skill development, information technology skill development. And the other is iMerit, which is a social enterprise committed to providing, world-class service in internet and technology to global clients. So before I go into the technology part and how it creates this large scale, how we utilize it to create this large scale impact, and how it creates a whole new business model which makes sense in this new world of ours, I'd just like to give you a story on the social impact, as the chairman says, because that's very, very important for us. So when we opened our first center in Metiabruz, which is a suburb of Kolkata, it's a very, very closed, very conservative Muslim society where girls are not allowed to go out without a burqa and not allowed to talk to strangers. When we opened the center 3 years ago, the community elders and the parents advised, even though it was an all-Muslim, all-girls center, the elders and the families advised their daughters not to come and be trained in Anudeep and work for iMerit. 3 years later, the fathers are bringing the younger sibling, the younger daughters, and saying, "Aap ek ladki le liye, dusri ko bhi le lijiye. You've taken one daughter, please take the other one as well." What has happened is, in this young girl, 3 years ago, who was really the most unwanted member of the community and family, through the work experience of iMerit, through the technology, leveraging of technology and the business model that we have, is not only working on the highest level of verticals of information technology, of social media, mobile, big data analytics, and curated crowd, and cloud services, but is also earning 3 times the total income of the family. So from being the most marginalized person in the community, she becomes the most valuable. And that to me creates that's a very human story to say that that is the power of technology and social inclusion and good that you can do through technology. We always talk about building a bridge. What we are doing in Anudeep and iMerit is building the bridge from Silicon Valley to the Sundarbans, which is the Everglades of Kolkata. Anudeep has been in existence for 9 years now. There's 50,000 graduates who have been placed in various organizations through a process training and then placed. iMerit has 5 centers, close to 1,000 people right now, doing absolutely world-class global IT work. If you look at the technology, and if you look at, we talk about the digital divide and we talk about the technology progress, what we've seen is, in this digital world, in this high-tech world, it leaves millions of unemployed youth with no credentials. They have no college degrees, very poor spoken English, but full of potential. And they are in this vicious cycle of poverty. So what our business model and this ICT and this frugal innovation and technology creates is, and we say because the technology allows us, we will bring the jobs to your communities. You don't have to come to Gurgaon, you don't have to come to Mumbai. So our centers are in Metiabruz, our centers are outside Ranchi, in Bootimore. And for frugal innovation, our favorite tagline is, we do not have espresso machines in our cafeterias. But these are the people, the secret sauce that iMerit and Anudeep have realized, and the potential is the power of human potential leveraged with technology can produce the best in class services. So when we talk to IBM or Microsoft, who are our clients, and say your quality standard is 95%, ours is 99%. Because you tap into, through technology, bring the jobs to their communities, but what you tap into is this fount of resource who were unemployable before. And through process and technology, you make them masters of their operations and process, and you keep building their skill levels up and the S-curve up. So you create a whole new business model, and saying that we don't have these fancy campuses, we don't have this fixed overheads and infrastructure. We're an on-demand digital company. Last month, we did close to 60,000 tasks from Uber alone. From Uber in Europe, Uber in Philippines coming. And these are people in German. And I keep coming back to them, and I keep getting surprised at the potential of these people. So we've been a Harvard Business Review case study. Just last week, we were featured in USA Today as a front page article for iMerit and Anudeep, saying the path of technology leads to Kolkata right now. And so we are all every day humbled. The social inclusion that happens, it's the 60% of our workforce are women. 98% of them are are not graduates, they're class 10 or class 12 passes. Most of them can't speak English at all or very, very, very poorly. And yet they're doing the highest quality of verticals of social media, mobile, big data analytics, and crowd. So that's where you combine the power of technology, you leverage the ICT as with the people, with the resource that you have, and you create the completely new business model. You re-engineer the business model to deliver the quality, to deliver the sustainability of the jobs, because you keep going up in higher and higher end of scale of as far as jobs are concerned. But you keep a very strong focus of where your roots are, where your social mission is. Because when we were young, the question used to be, do you want top line growth or do you want profits? And the correct answer is to be yes. But right now, the consumers are asking that do you want top line growth? Do you want profits? And are you making a social impact? Because it makes sound business sense to be doing this. It's not just a CSR activity. You just recreate the business model where the consumers reward you for being good citizen of this economy. And that's where the power of technology comes in. All of this swath of people who were unemployable, who were marginalized, who were tribals, who are Maoists, are now one of the most significant contributors to this economy of ours. So that's what I would say is a social inclusion. Large scale, Anudeep, which was training 10,000 students a year, within 3 years through ICT, through a revision of the business model, will be training 100,000 students a year. So that's where you appreciate the growth that is coming in, and our funders, etc., recognize that growth is the power of technology for social improvement, for making a sound business case, and frugal engineering. All of these three combined. Thank you.
Thank you, Joydeep. Tanchina, what are your thoughts on what has been said so far? You've heard three of them. What would you, and what we would like to hear on Singapore's experience about an ICT-driven strategy of economic development and the creation of successful clusters between academia and the business, and how has ICT created new business models?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I do like to thank the organizer for inviting me here. It is a real privilege and honor. I will focus my comments on the ICT journey, the IT journey of Singapore. Singapore became independent in 1965. So last year we celebrated 50 years of nation building. In 1965, our per capita GDP was roughly $350 US. Today, 55,000 US dollars. Now, the ICT journey actually started in 1980 with the Committee on National Computerization coming out with a plan to computerize the whole country. And we have gone through 7 IT master plan, 2 media plans, and a new national vision. So it's 7 plus 2 plus 1. Now, I would like to go through very quickly the 7 IT master plans. Now, the first master plan was about computerizing the whole country through computerizing the civil service, through manpower development, and also making Singapore a software center. That was in 1980, and the National Computer Board was formed in 1991. Version 2 would have Singapore integrating computer and communication into IT, and therefore National IT Plan, which was injected into the Economic Committee report as Chapter 17. So that's the second version. Third version happened in 1991. IT 2000, vision of an intelligent island. And this is where we have moved from compute to conduits. I'll be introducing the concept of 5 Cs. So the third C has got to do with content. And this was what IT 2000 was about. Exploiting IT in all sectors. Having a national information infrastructure. So the contents would then move to the next version, Infocom 21. This was when the ICT term was introduced. First we had data processing, computer. Computer became information system, IT, and now Infocom. And the Infocom Development Authority was set up by incorporating National Computer Board together with the telecom regulatory body. So this coincides with the liberalization of telecom. So this particular movement towards integrating computer and communication, resulting in ICT, will continue to evolve. Infocom 21, then Connected Singapore, which is about unleashing our potential. This microphone is not correct.
It's okay. I think it's...
Is this better?
Hello. Can you hear?
I think this is better.
Yeah.
So the compute, conduit, contents, the 3C would move from Infocom 21 to Connected Singapore, and the fifth articulation would be the Intelligent Nation 2015. Now this is the vision and the plan where Singapore would have the most advanced information infrastructure, broadband, fiber to the home, in order to link up every school, every home, every factory, in order to give Singapore the competitive advantage. So this is another sphere, content. Then I would like to introduce a fourth C, which has got to do with connect. And this connect, because of the power of integration of technology, convergence of technology, would propel Singapore forward as an economic engine. So from the 4C, we would also go down to the last C, community. So throughout our ICT journey, I would say, the focus has always been on exploiting IT, exporting IT, making IT to help our national competitiveness and to enhance our quality of life. So those themes will continue throughout the whole process. It is a journey. It is a work in progress, and we are still evolving. And meanwhile, we had two media plans. First, Media 21, which was conceived as part of the strategy to make Singapore a creative Singapore, a creative economy, because we have gone through a big S-curve of economic growth. So the high point has got to do with making Singapore innovative, entrepreneurial. So the Media Development Authority was set up in response to the move to make Singapore a creative Singapore. And the second version of the Singapore Media Plan was entitled Singapore Media Fusion Plan. So those two plans, making Singapore a global media capital, were injected into the National ICT Plan and resulted in the 7th ICT Plan, which was entitled Infocom Media 2025, which was released last year. So you can see that we have moved from computer to IT, ICT, and finally Infocom Media. To make Singapore Infocom Media savvy, to make sure that we'll be able to create the ecosystem, to continue to do experimentation, to have risk-taking, to evolve a startup ecosystem. So through this 7 versions of our ICT master plan, incorporating the media plan, the convergence aspect, and sitting on top of that, the new national vision of making Singapore a smart nation. Evolving intelligent island into intelligent nation, and finally, smart nation. And this is where the IoT, the sensors, the nationwide connectivity, and the trust continues to be on using infocom media to boost our productivity, to enhance our quality of the life, to bring the community together, more cohesive through the use of infocom technology in order to create a better society. So this is what I would describe as 7+2+1. The 7 versions of the National IT Plan, plus the 2 versions of Media Plan, integrating into Infocom Media, which is the new way of how Singapore will want to develop our ICT industry, making Singapore a smart nation. So the Jurong Lake area has been converted into an experimental area, an experimental district in order to try out the latest in technology, including autonomous driverless cars, in order to improve our transport, to use technology to improve our learning, to use technology to improve our health system, and this will all integrate into a new version of whole of government approach, whole of Singapore approach in using ICT to make life better for Singaporeans. And just 2 weeks ago, in the budget statement, the Minister of Finance also talked about evolving another area next to the Jurong Lake to become the Jurong Innovation District, to build on the successful example of One North. One North has got an area which is known as Block 71. Right now the new name is GSDC Launchpad, and this is a new ecosystem of startup. So the startup fever is possible because of almost 40 years, 45 years of continuous development, integrating ICT into our economic development process, linking the universities to our industry, our R&D institutes under the Agency for Science and Technology and Research, our national body in terms of promoting further R&D, National Research Foundation, overseen by the Council on Research, Innovation and Enterprise, chaired by the Prime Minister himself, together with the new Smart Nation Program Office, also overseen by the Prime Minister, will adopt a multidisciplinary approach in order to use technology to transform life, to make the society better. So this is really the story of the Singapore ICT journey. It involves a whole of country approach. It involves coming out with a vision, different version of the vision continuously, using technology in order to make tomorrow better than today. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. I think all the 4 of you covered the different aspects of ICT, including the social inclusion, the social impact, and as a nation, how do you look at this whole thing, including education, schools, and applications. Now, all of these things also have a counterpoint of view. And I was just reading an article in the New Yorker, which is the latest one, about what they call as alternate school, where it's completely a technology-driven elementary school developed by the Silicon Valley tech veterans. The claim they make is it aims to disrupt students' education through data collection and hyper-personalized learning. What I want to hear is, based on some of the comments of the readers, where they said, I felt a pang of sadness while reading Rebecca Mead's piece on art school. As an elementary school educator, I know that there is a real need for educational reform, but by focusing on how technology can quantify a child's potential, we lose the essence of education. All schools' learning practices in which school work is done on a tablet and then tracked and minutely analyzed, all those data analytics we talked about, anchors children to their machines. Avoiding technology has now become an effort for most people. Schools should be teaching social skills, collaborative work, and responsibility. We should be helping children develop into dynamic individuals, not isolating them and making them dependent on technology. What are your views? Soumitra, we'll start with you and then.
Will I get all the hard questions first, being the academic out here? Okay. If you look at young people today, and I have the incredible privilege of working with a lot of young students year after year at a university, and I'm sure you have your colleagues and other young people around you. I honestly don't see them any less prepared for the world than I was at their age. If anything, I'm completely blown away by the level of knowledge they have, the level of interest they have in different topics, and how prepared they are for the different parts of building their own careers and professional goals. So I'm not really of the believer that technology is only having the negative side effects. Are there negative side effects? Of course. With any technology, it doesn't matter which technology you choose, there are the positives and the negatives. And it is our choice about how we use technology. I have many examples, I will not go through them in detail, but where technology has been used in extremely creative ways to help the learning process. There's a company started by an MBA student from Stanford called Piazza. We use it in some of the courses at Cornell. That's extremely useful for peer-to-peer question answer solving, especially in the evenings when often students work, the faculty are not available, the office hours not there, professors not there to answer questions, but they can actually get help from each other. I do believe that that is helping the learning. So while you can always take examples of situations where technology is perhaps taking away something that we thought was important, I think what we have to keep in mind is the balance. Let's also look at how technology is bringing back new things, learning experience. And let's ask the question, are we using this new potential creatively? So an example of social learning, we all know social media, social learning each other is a huge part of how people learn. Are professors, are teachers used to that model? The answer is clearly not. Most professors, including myself, we fall prey to that false assumption that I am the person who can teach best. All the learning comes from me. And that is completely wrong. So I think we have to change the mindsets of how we look at technology. We have to be open to change ourselves about how we teach. I have many colleagues who did MOOCs, the massive open online courses. And they tell me it's incredibly hard to do it properly. Why? Because it forces you to go back and look at how you teach. How do people learn? What assumptions do you make about how people learn? Because we tend to make assumptions that are no longer true. So I do believe that technology is a force for good. And it's for us to be able to decide how to change it, how to use it creatively, and minimize some of the risks and negative side effects.
Thank you. Any others, any comments?
So, my view is actually quite similar to this, except that I think we have to look at it from a slightly more holistic viewpoint. The Eastern philosophy, which talks about, the life is a full circle kind of a philosophy. We're here as an ephemeral beings for a certain period in this world. And also I want to put in some numbers which I read about some of the Indian societies and Indian people being among the happiest in the world, in spite of the happiness index being very high, in spite of us being so low on most of the other parameters which the developed world and the other developing worlds also have. I think there has to be a fine balance between the human touch and the human interaction, which we as human beings over centuries of development have been modeled to grow up with. And on the other side, you have the tech world, which is personalizing a lot of it, which is helping you develop as an individual and in a longer sense as a society as well. So I think it's a balance between the two. It's a continuous development, and the way I see it is that it's a continuous change which is happening. There is no end goal. There is no end that this is where we want to reach 20 years or 50 years or 100 years later. It's a continuous journey, and societies which do not cope with this journey are in danger of being left behind. So this is my kind of my comment on this. I'm an Indian. I love the human part of it, but I also believe that if we do not, as Professor Soumitra mentioned, that the gap in technology usage is increasing between past and even today. If we do not keep pace as a developing country, then we risk being left even further behind what's going on. So I think it has to marry both sides, and we have to find a balance between the two. That's my take on it. Thank you.
And the 7 + 2 + 1, which you articulated starting from early 80s, starting with the National Computer Board, and then the vision that is articulated now in terms of what it enables the citizens and what is the kind of platform that is available, including innovation and Singapore as a country. What's your view about replication of what Singapore has done across developing countries like India?
Well, Singapore is a small country.
Right.
So our experience may not be that applicable elsewhere, because you do have to make a lot of adaptation. But certainly resulting from 50 years of development, 50 years of coming up with urban solutions. Right now, including water management, waste management, using technology, and now we are of course going into this area of smart city, smart nation. All this are considered exportable. Remember when I talk about 7 + 2 + 1, the common theme has always been on export and export IT, or now Infocom media. So Singapore companies have been mobilized to help countries, to cities, to develop new township, smart city, knowledge city, eco-city, including in India, right, to help build a new capital city.
Right.
So all this would illustrate that by using technology appropriately, by learning in the process of carrying out the continuous experimentation, the resultant knowledge with adaptation can be used elsewhere, perhaps. Now I'd like to come back to the earlier question that you posed concerning technology. Now I would like to move now into the 7 + 2 + 1, the one aspect, which is the new vision of Singapore as a smart nation. Now this is not to position Singapore as a hardware-oriented society where everything is connected. We're using a lot of data analytics in order to be more targeted towards your consumers, in order to help you to make more money. That's not the case. In fact, when Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong announced the Smart Nation vision, he was more adopting a highly integrated approach in order to build on what we have done in the technological area. And the core theme is to make Singaporeans live meaningful and fulfilling life. Now, if technology can help us to deal with the mundane, the routine, so that our creativity can be applied to building things, to come up with solutions to complicated problems. Then I think this will be a contribution to society. And if the experience can be used elsewhere, that's even better. That's a bonus. So it's on improving people's lives.
Thanks a lot. Joydeep,
Sir.
one is the Anudeep Foundation, which you talked about, but the one issue which is confronting this country is one of scale. So, do you have any one or two ideas on scaling up such an initiative? The second one, because you have a financial background, since you were replaced at the last minute, I'm going to use your financial background to ask a question. What's your assessment of the current transformation in the payment industry? Do you see a world without paper money in the future?
Yeah, I'll take one by one. So as far as scale is concerned, and that's where the power of technology really comes in. With Anudeep, right now we are training 12 to 14,000 graduates, students a year, graduating them into this skills training program, livelihood, and putting them in jobs. In 3 years, our plan is to raise that number, staggering up from 50,000 and going up to, in 4 or 5 years, to 100,000 a year. And how are we doing that is leveraging technology into re-engineering the process itself. Right now, when Anudeep started, it was a very standardized classroom setting with a professor, with a trainer, with fixed computers, with students, chairs, infrastructure, etc. And remember, these are in the deepest of deep rural tribal belts of India, of Eastern India. So there used to be a limitation of finding trainers, there used to be a limitation in finding standardization of content, there used to be out training, there used to be the students themselves. And in these last 6 years, the world has changed. The students we find are much more savvy as far as internet is concerned, mobile is concerned. So where we could not even dream of providing training materials or knowledge through technology is now available. Instead of these fixed training centers, we are creating resource centers where people will come and just be able to access the internet and take our courses. So there is this one trainer who will be there monitoring 10 or 12 systems. So where scale is concerned, sir, you're exactly right, otherwise it doesn't make any sense. So from this 10 to 12,000, we have a plan within 4 years to make it to 100,000, and it's incremental, and that's where our partners believe. As far as the payment paper-free is concerned, I think it is becoming more and more a part of our lives.
Right.
When I talk with my daughter, she can't think of taking out a wallet and paying for this. The whole industry has changed. The whole society has changed. These people are so much more empowered. So it will happen. It will. I see that more and more. And as globalization happens, we do business across the globe right now. So that concept of paper money is going to be diminished and diminished. Absolutely, sir.
Thank you.
I think paperless money, as we're talking about, if you just see the evolution over the last 20, 25 years itself, in countries here, when almost everything in India till about 1990 was in cash. Even our banks were not really automated and we had those physical passbooks. Today we are talking of, in about 25 years, a scenario where I think most of us sitting in this room at least, probably 70-80% of our transactions are paperless, are money, paper money less. The offices that we work in, 20 years back we used to talk of reducing paper in the office. Today I don't have paper in my office. So, short of signing some legal contracts, there is hardly any paper that we ever use in our office, not now, but for last. So I think it's again a journey which is there, it's going on, and I do see a very high, paper money, less kind of society as we move forward.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Before I turn over to the audience,
Chairman, I'd just like to add one to your first question, which Soumitra and Atul had answered. The power of technology to be good and bad. And I think there is an enormous power, and with that enormous power comes an enormous responsibility. So to ensure that there is this inclusiveness in the development and usage of technology, I think it's a conscious decision which makes more and more sense right now. So that power of technology as an inclusive tool to really uplift society, that is only through technology that scale can happen, that breadth can happen. I think.
So if any of you had to comment on Apple and FBI conflict, what would you say?
Sorry?
The Apple and the FBI conflict, what would you say? Power of technology, privacy, whatever views, or you want to duck it? That's fine.
It's a good question. I know where my personal beliefs are. I mean where I'm not sure. There is a responsibility also. There is a responsibility also. There is a line where privacy or thing ends and where the responsibility begins. I think the societal responsibility is a very key component, and I'll leave it at that for the audience to gather. But I think there is a responsibility, corporate citizenship and responsibility that needs to happen.
Go to the audience, please. Questions you can direct to anyone. Sir.
Thank you. My question is to Mr. Mukherjee. And this is following from what, Mr. Chairman, you asked about what is the scalability of this project, this initiative that you've taken. Now, you mentioned that in about 3 years' time, the training will go up to about 100,000. Can you also share some thoughts, some ideas about the magnitude of the problem?
Right.
You mentioned about the scalability that it goes up, but then how much are you able really to deal
Correct.
with or tackle? If you permit one question to Mr. Jain, or this thing was about the use of paper money, and you said, everyone in this room. But of course, we do realize and recognize that, what is in this room is not India. And, when we are talking about India, whether it's the rural areas particularly, the first thing that we are really looking at there is financial inclusion.
Yeah.
And how long is it going to take? 60-65% of the population lives in villages in the rural areas. So how long is it going to take the economy to become paperless in that section? I can understand that certain pockets, prosperous pockets, would become paperless. But about for the country to become paperless in that context, I think that might be still a long haul. Thank you.
I'll take the scale question, sir, and you're absolutely right. In the eastern region where we operate, there's 25 to 30 million unemployed youth right now looking for jobs who are traditionally unemployable. They're class 10, class 12, 98% of them are not graduates, can't speak English. So 100,000 against 25 million people is a very small difference. Even if you take the 10x multiplier impact of that you touch one person and it impacts 10, that's a million that we're talking about. So, and that's one organization. But that's where, Mr. Ramadorai and sir, with your councils, etc., is I think we are providing the proof of concept that this model works. It's not something you do because it is a nice thing to do to give somebody a training in an IT or skills development. You do it because it makes sound economic business sense. And that's where you tap into, this whole population, which was thought to be unemployable and you cannot employ them in high-skilled IT jobs. And we are seeing them do the highest quality IT jobs. They are not rural BPOs. But what you tap into is really the passion and integrity of these people. Since coming back from the US, I've been 10 years in Gurgaon before I moved to Kolkata to mentor these two organizations. And I've worked for companies like American Express or HSBC and MetLife. And in the entire IT industry, the biggest cost is the cost of attrition. So you have 20-30% attrition a month, and that is considered to be a good month. In our case, the learning curve could be 2 months compared to this young kid who comes and joins me in Gurgaon. But my attrition is 2% a year. So these people who had joined this company 3 years ago are now earning $80, $90 a day, $45, $50 a day. Because we have invested in them. So if you talk about investing, and I think there is a true multiplier impact that is happening within this organization. And the scale itself is just not in terms of the money or the number you teach, but the change that you bring into society. Our center outside Ranchi is one of the World Bank's, one of the few World Bank projects where they gave grant to a private for a social enterprise, and it's a showpiece for World Bank. So when there are these Southeast Asian country seminar, etc., we are invited to go and speak and say, what would work? And so when you go to Ranchi, for example, it's outside Bhutimore, and the World Bank Development Chairman was there. And he was seeing this girl who was coming 20 miles in a bicycle to come to this work, and she was copying that day's Super Bowl images for New York Times. And he said, Joy, you keep talking about the 10x salary you provide and the technology you provide and the nice facilities you provide, etc. But what you're also doing is bringing a new normal to all of them. You're telling them New York exists, London exists, the Super Bowl exists. So for them, these girls in deep villages, tribals, it's creating a new 21st century. So you're bringing the 21st century to them. And that, I think, is a rapid accelerator movement that happens. So more and more in the communities that we work in, when we started, as I said, Metia Bruce, now the elders are coming and saying, why only girls? Why aren't you opening for the boys? So the whole community changes to say more, more, more. So I think, and with people like Sir to help guidance this council, I think the potential is enormous. Because it makes sense. It's not because you're just doing it because it's a nice thing to do. Because it makes sense to do it.
Thank you. Sir.
You want me to... On paperless money, I just want to say that, paperless money is just one example which we talked about. And then there are a lot of other systemic issues which go around it, how fast it can accelerate. But another example which we can take and which immediately comes to my mind is, and much more recent, is e-commerce. Now, because of the facilitation of and the amalgamation of communication and technology, today what is available to a small kid in a small town or a small village of India, literally, is the same as what is available to a large kid. So, so yes, the magnitude of problem is very, very big. But the issue is that it enables everybody to get the benefits of it. Now, whether those benefits can reach the final consumer or the small guy, it depends on the environment around you.
Yes, sir. Just start speaking and just.
Question is regarding responsibility of ICT. We are talking as a leapfrog for economy. Don't you think it's also a health hazard like e-waste, radiation, and other things? How we are going to deal with this situation? What is the experience of Singapore? How you are dealing with e-waste?
E-waste. How they are dealing with e-waste in Singapore?
E-waste.
Waste. Electronic waste.
Well, e-waste is not an area of my expertise, so I wouldn't be able to comment too much on this particular question. But certainly, I would say, in order to get the whole country to be e-savvy, in order to benefit from technological progress, so all aspects will have to be covered, including e-waste. And of course, I think in the area of cybersecurity and so on, we will have to also deal with this. So all these agencies are now working hand in hand in order to make sure that all aspects, the positive impact, the negative impact of ICT will all be dealt with.
Thank you. Mrs. Maja.
One question to Tan Shinam and Soumitra Dutta. I think, Shinam, you have... the mic is not... Shinam, you have described very well how a very well articulated, elaborated plan, step by step, has brought Singapore to the level it is today in terms of ICT. At the same time, Soumitra, you were telling that the technology gap is not shrinking.
Right.
If you look at the example of Singapore, and I know that the example of Singapore cannot be replicated throughout the world because it is a very specific case, but both of you, would you consider that in fact today you cannot have a kind of leveraging of technology without having a well thought and well implemented industrial policy, to give the appropriate name to what we are talking about. Because if I look at the US, what we have had through the research oriented by the Pentagon, even if you look at the story of the development of shale gas and oil, this was industrial policy. What we have seen in Singapore is the success of industrial policy well conceived. So what would be your opinion on that? Could you get this kind of leapfrogging through ICT without a well-articulated industrial policy?
So let me go first, and then perhaps the Singapore example can be talked about more. I think it's becoming, you're very correct. If you look at, is technology making you better than what you were 5 years ago? The answer in most developing economies, the answer would be yes. So yes, you can do things in India and Africa that 5 years ago or 10 years ago would have been impossible. So a lot of people say, of course, technology is helping development in my country because it's helping me to achieve things previously not easily possible. What people are not comparing as easily is, at the same time, what is Korea doing and what is Finland doing and what is the leading benchmark doing? Where is Singapore 5 years ago and where are they today and where will they be 5 years from now? They can't compare it. And what the research is showing is the gap is increasing.
Yep.
And technology is an accelerator, is a magnifier, and the rich and the people who have the right leadership, the right plans, are becoming stronger, and this is also what you see at a global level. The US has come out stronger.
Yeah.
So this is really, in some sense, what you're seeing. There is increasing concentration, and I think we'll be fooling ourselves just because we have now phones moving from 3G to 4G in India that we feel we are the leading edge of technology in the country. And the same is true even for the large IT companies in the country. I think there is a real challenge out here in terms of saying, after having 30 years of leadership in some sector of IT, why hasn't India produced the Microsofts and the other Googles and whatever the names you can take in the technology sector successfully? Because by now, we should have produced a couple of them.
Yep.
Well, I think in the field of economic development, industrial targeting is always considered a bad term, right? If you were to ask the economic development officers, are they doing industrial policy, the answer would be no. But on the other hand, we have continued to evolve various versions of our economic plan. And right now, Minister Heng Swee Keat is leading the future economy plan involving the industry very, very intimately in order to learn from them and then to articulate what should be the next direction, what should be the next S-curve. Now, coming back to the ICT plan, when we first started national computerization effort in 1981 with the formation of the National Computer Board, we had only a total of 850 computer professionals, and many did not receive formal training. Today, we have 150,000, and we are still short of the 30,000, particularly in the area of data science, etc. Now, who would have imagined that in 1981, ICT will become so important? And who would have imagined that we would need 7 versions of ICT master plan in order to get Singapore to where it is today? And this is still work in progress. So I think the adaptiveness of the society is very important. This is about adapting, adjusting, experimentation, and we learn, and we may fail here and there, but it is important to continue with the trajectory in order to get there. So I think this is a very interesting phase where we are going to see a lot of integration. Integration of technology, convergence of technology, and I think the outcome will be very beneficial to the country. So it is important to develop the students, to train the workforce, to convert the workforce in such a way that everyone will be able to play a role. The inclusive kind of approach, and therefore skills future, training for the future, to be future ready. And EDB is very fond of the term future ready, making Singapore a future ready economy. And this will require a certain degree of collaboration and articulation, but we must have the flexibility. We must have the ability to adjust as we move along.
Thank you. The last question, please.
Thank you. I think I have an observation. There is a small company, woman-owned, in Coimbatore, in analytics, developed a proprietary algorithm valued at $150 million, a very small startup. Sir, my question for Mr. Ramadorai. I guess one clear thing which happened in Singapore, where they are rated #1 on ease of doing business. And I think that's where IT played a huge role as far as the government is concerned. And maybe we should accelerate our use of IT in the government sector. Instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, we can learn from their experience. And I have a question for Professor Dutta, that generally now a huge debate happens in India that our services are much larger in percentage as compared to manufacturing and agriculture. It gives you a sense as if the three sectors are competing with each other. And my take on this is that each one has a role to play. And if we have to benchmark, we should see how agriculture is growing in terms of percentage growth, how services is growing in terms of percentage growth, and how manufacturing is growing in percentage of growth. And each one should grow to their maximum potential. What is your take on that when you compare economies, as you said you do in the US?
Soumitra, I want to answer and then I'll summarize.
So, actually across the hall, there's a event organized in Maharashtra. Sorry, correction, Madhya Pradesh, exactly. And Madhya Pradesh is an excellent example of how agriculture productivity has increased tremendously. And that is because there has been massive investment in the whole irrigation infrastructure in the country. It's a classical case study.
Correct.
And I agree with you. You have to improve productivity in all three sectors. And now technology is entering into agriculture also. At Cornell, which has a very big agricultural school, there's a whole new field called precision agriculture developing, using big data technology in agriculture. The challenge for India is what? Yes, we have a proportionately larger service sector, proportionately smaller manufacturing sector, but it is hard for a country to take a farmer and move that farmer into a call center. I know you have examples of that given earlier, but on a large scale, it is much easier to take a farmer, make that farmer into a factory worker, and the factory worker into a more service sector worker. So there is a progression that happens in most economic development cycles. So if you want to take and alleviate poverty in India, the reality is that it has to be driven by improvements, productivity of agriculture, and a growth in the manufacturing sector. And that's one reason why the Make in India is so important, the current Prime Minister's plan. So I think IT will not solve India's poverty issue. It'll help at the margin, but it'll not solve it.
Yeah, just to conclude, thank you, each one of you, for participating. I think the role of ICT as a critical enabler in improving the efficiency and transparency, especially for the public service delivery, is now well appreciated within the government and in the country. Whether you take the Jan Dhan Yojana, Aadhaar or Mobility, JAM as it is called, I think that's essentially an example of technology being harnessed holistically to drive inclusive economic growth. When you look at the financial inclusion as an area of critical importance, or the food security, healthcare, education and skill development, I think these are high priority areas for the government and for the nation. And every infrastructure that is being put in place, and some of the examples which we heard are being applied on top of it, and we are collaborating or we are taking help from multiple governments across the world. We learn from Singaporeans, from Sweden, from Switzerland, from Australia, from US, from UK, you name it. There are a number of technology-enabled transformations where a public-private partnership has enabled success in this country. Example, in the Passport Seva project. I mean, we handle almost 3.4 crore applications. 3.3 crore passports are issued. 1.8 crore daily online hits. 50,000 daily footfalls. And a 99.5% satisfaction index from the consumers or customers. The system availability is more than 99%. Similarly, e-filing on the Department of Income Tax, India Post, Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs, I can go on and on. So these are all examples of how the transformation is taking place in a country on a scale basis. So I think it was a very, very productive session. Thank you so much everyone for attending this. Thanks to all the panelists.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot.
You had some very relevant point on this service to manufacturing to the call